Welcome to the Explainer. You know, one of the single riskiest parts of any project has got to be the budget. Today, we're going to show you how to move beyond just, well, guesswork and build a financial plan that you can actually count on. I mean, we've all been there, right? A project kicks off, the budget looks pretty simple, and then suddenly costs just start creeping up and up until the whole thing spirals. It's a total headache. But guess what? It's a headache you can actually avoid with the right tools.
So in this explainer, we're going to walk through a real-world case study to show you exactly how it's done. We'll see why those simple back-of-the-napkin estimates fail, and then we'll give you two really powerful techniques to help you master your project budgets for good. Okay, let's dive right in. To make all of this really practical, we're going to stick with one single example through this whole explainer: planning and pulling off an annual executive meeting. You know, it's so easy to just throw out a single number. Let's say $6,000 for our meeting. But a number all by itself, it's pretty much useless. To really be in control of a budget, you have to know what you're spending that money on, why it's even necessary, and, this is the big one, when you're actually going to need the cash. So, how do we track all of those details? Well, that brings us to our very first tool, a surprisingly simple but incredibly powerful document called the Resource Breakdown Structure, or RBS for short.
The best way to think about the RBS is as the single source of truth for your project's money. It's not just a shopping list of costs. It's more like a financial map that connects every single dollar to a specific task right there in your project schedule.
Okay, let's see this thing in action for our executive meeting. You can see every cost is listed out, from the venue deposit all the way to the final support invoice. But here's what's crucial. Each one is tied to a specific date and something called a WBS activity number. Now, WBS just stands for Work Breakdown Structure. It's basically your project plan, just broken down into individual tasks. This is what links every dollar to a specific action item. And look, when we add it all up, we still get our $6,000 total. But the difference is night and day. This isn't just some number we guessed anymore. It's an organized, transparent, and totally actionable financial plan where every single dollar has a job to do.
So organizing our costs is a huge step forward. But this brings up a really important question. How do we come up with accurate cost estimates in the first place, especially for things that are kind of uncertain? Most of us, when we're asked for an estimate, we just give one number, our best guess, right? That's called single-point estimation. And for costs that are totally fixed, that's fine. But for anything with a bit of uncertainty, a much safer and more professional way to do it is with three-point estimation.
Now, this approach is so powerful because it forces you and your team to think beyond just the obvious answer. You have to consider the absolute best-case scenario, that's your optimistic estimate, and the absolute worst-case scenario where things go wrong, that's your pessimistic estimate, right alongside what you feel is most likely to happen. Okay, to see how this works, let's pretend we're estimating a cost that's a little tricky. After talking it over, the team decides the best-case scenario is 20, the absolute worst case is 45, and the most realistic, most likely outcome is probably 25.
All right, now we've got our three numbers: optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic. We have what we need. Now we can use two different methods to crunch those numbers into our final, much more reliable estimate. The first method is as straightforward as it gets. It's called three-point averaging, and it does exactly what you think it does. It just calculates a simple average of our three estimates. The math here is super simple. We just add our optimistic 20, our most likely 25, and our pessimistic 45. That gives us 90. Then we just divide that total by 3. Easy.
So, using this simple average, our final estimate for this budget item is 30. Now that is already way better than a single guess, but there's an even more sophisticated method that can get us an even sharper number.
And that brings us to our second method, which is called PERT. It stands for Program Evaluation Review Technique. Now, this method is more sophisticated because it doesn't treat all three estimates as equals. Instead, it gives more weight to the one that's most likely to actually happen.
So the logic behind PERT actually comes from statistics. It turns out that for most estimates, that most likely outcome is about 4 times more likely to happen than either the absolute best or the absolute worst case scenario. And that's why the method gives it a heavier weight in the final math.
Here's how the PERT calculation works. We take our most likely estimate, that's 25, and multiply it by 4. Then we add our other two numbers to that. That gives us a new total of 165.
And since we used 6 parts in our weighting, 1 plus 4 plus 1, we now divide that total by 6.
And there's our new number. Using the statistically weighted PERT method, our more refined estimate is 27.5. You can see it's been pulled a little closer to that most likely value of 25, which makes perfect sense.
Putting the two results right next to each other really clarifies the difference, doesn't it? The simple average gave us 30. The PERT method, by giving more weight to the most realistic outcome, gave us a more conservative and statistically sound figure of 27.5. And believe me, for important projects, that small difference can matter a whole lot.
Okay, so after all that, what are the key things you should take away from this and apply to your very next project?
It really all comes down to these two powerful tools. First, you have to use a resource breakdown structure so you're not just tracking a total number, you're actually managing your cash flow. And second, for any of those uncertain costs, use PERT estimation to create a budget that's based on probability, not just a wild guess. When you combine these two, you stop hoping for the best, and you start actually planning for success.
And that's our look at smarter project budgeting. So the question I'll leave you with is this: how could a really clear RBS and a solid PERT estimate completely change the outcome of your next project? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.